This series of studies is for those new to this heavenly understanding, who are seeking to know the mysteries of God's prophecies, and also to those who already understand and accept this concept that all truly inspired books and texts were written using a parabolic language system. There is an earthly language that gives a literal historical understanding, and a pictorial heavenly language that reveals a universal spiritual understanding. This heavenly language is couched within the earthly literal language. It's the light of God's true knowledge within the literal earthly image we see. Or as it states in Romans 1:20, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. An example of this is in Psalms 119:105. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. So a lamp symbolizes God's word, and in every language there is a word for lamp. Thus, in every language, lamp means word of God. These earthly and heavenly aspects of God's word give completely different interpretations, so different that they are to be considered separate languages. They cannot be mixed in any conceivable way. The heavenly language aspect of God's word is so diverse from the earthly aspect that when the prophetic books are translated in it, these books become completely separate books from the books interpreted in the earthly aspect of the language. From studying the parabolic interpretations of scriptures, I believe these books translated and understood in this ancient heavenly spiritual language will become the ones Enoch in chapter 104 prophesied would be returned to us. In the book of Enoch, it reveals three prophetic events that must take place before our Father's kingdom is restored. It says at a distant generation that these wicked who have created great deceptions and perversions concerning God's word are going to be removed. Then at that time, the true meaning of these books will be restored. And lastly, that these books will then be returned to us, God's people. None of the so-called prophecy teachers in our age can tell us exactly how Christ is to return. But right here in these few verses, Enoch lays out step by step exactly how everything is going to happen. In Enoch 104, and now I know this mystery, that sinners will alter and pervert the word of righteousness in many ways, and will speak wicked words, and lie, and practice great deceits, and write books concerning these deceits, their words. This is exactly what is happening in our day. If you look at it, we have 45,000 different denominations, each with their own doctrinal interpretation. And each one claims to be the only correct and true interpretation of God's word. And on top of this, they write countless more books in their own words, commentating on their doctrinal interpretations. This is complete merchandising of God's word and his temple, his people. In 11, but when time comes that they write down truthfully all my words in their language, and do not change or diminish aught from my words, but write them all down truthfully, all that I first testified concerning them. Now you have to keep this in context, that he is talking about these books that are going to be returned to the righteous and wise. This is simply using this universal pictorial language to interpret the true meaning of God's word into all languages. This is what returns these books back to us. And the reason these books are given to the righteous and wise, because they are the ones that will translate and restore the understanding of these books that have been laid hidden throughout the last 6+ millennium. In Isaiah 58:12, and they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places, thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations. In this first part of the verse, it talks about these foundations, and what are our foundations? In Ephesians 2:20, and we are built upon the foundations of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. These verses in Enoch and Isaiah are referring to restoring the true Christ understanding, the hidden mystery to God's word. This will raise our understanding of the prophets and apostles' books that are our foundational stones mentioned in Ephesians 2:20. See, stones symbolize scriptures on an earthly level. When you have the cornerstone of Christ that was disallowed by the religious institutions of our day, you add this Christ understanding, the chief cornerstone, to these prophetic books. It raises them to a much higher, the heavenly understanding that reveals the things that truly may be known of our Creator. Finishing off verse 12, then I know another mystery, that the books, the restored ones, will be given to the righteous and the wise to become a cause of joy and uprightness, morality, and much wisdom. Another aspect of these books is that when you use the light and knowledge of God, the understanding of Christ, this knowledge opens these books, spoken of in Daniel 7:10 and Revelation 20:12. In Corinthians 3:13, it says that in the day, the Lord's day, that the fire, God's true word, will judge every man's works. Well, these books being open also judges the works of those who are spiritually dead. These are the books we already have that have been closed to the Christ understanding. They are entombed in the canon on the earthly level, symbolically just as Christ, God's word, was killed and buried in a stone earthen tomb. See, this true understanding is going to roll the stone away and open the tomb, letting the true light and knowledge of God's wisdom, Christ, the day star, shine forth. This understanding essentially opens these books so all can see what they really say compared to what man's wisdom has told us they say, thus judging every man's works as to whether they are spiritually dead or spiritually alive. Then Enoch goes on, and to them shall the books be given, and they shall believe in them and rejoice over them. And then shall all the righteous who have learnt from all the paths of uprightness be recompensed. This is paralleled again in the last part of Isaiah 58:12. And now it shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths. These are paths of knowledge, guarding our Creator to dwell in. These restored paths, these wise are learning from, are not physical paths, but are the spiritual paths of the true knowledge of God's Word. It was the destruction of these paths that caused the breach between God and man to begin with. In these few verses, Enoch is basically saying that at the return of these books, it is then going to be done, that morality, all the attributes of God's kingdom will be restored to mankind. If you look at this logically, we have already recovered a great many of these books physically, out of the earth, caves and pits, so forth. And if these recovered books are the ones Enoch is talking about, then these events he is referring to should have already happened. This great learning, return to morality, and our recompense that would usher in God's restored kingdom would be our reality. However, as we look at our world today, this is not the case. So what is it that is missing from this equation? These books being returned to the righteous and wise is the key marker here, because these books are not truly returned until they are translated into the heavenly understanding, so that God's people can then know that which may be known of Him.